If you're desperate to cure your bad breath, but are sick and tired of spending your hard-earned money on expensive mouthwashes, breath mints, and other dental products that just don't work, then listen up. What I'm going to show you is exactly what you need to eliminate your bad breath problem once and for all, for about $2. Seriously. This short presentation will outline for you a simple step-by-step protocol developed by U.S. government scientists at the National Institute of Health more than 40 years ago. To make a long story short, about 90% of all bad breath cases have a single cause, and for people in this group, those scientists practically fell over a specific combination of common household ingredients that eliminate the bad breath problem 96 times out of 100. In other words, they developed a 96% effective cure for bad breath. Pretty amazing, eh? So why haven't you heard about this before? Well, unfortunately, this kind of bad breath work wasn't the main focus of their research. It was pretty much an accidental discovery that they stumbled across while looking for something else. So after publishing their findings in a few scientific journals, they moved on to other things and their work was almost forgotten. Until now. We have used their research to devise an updated technique which takes account of more recent developments in the field, and it works almost immediately. It gives incredibly rapid relief from bad breath. And instead of merely masking the symptoms, like most other bad breath treatments do, this simple procedure actually eliminates the root cause of bad breath and provides specific recommendations to prevent the problem from ever coming back. And best of all, it uses an easy, safe $2 mixture of ingredients that are so common you probably already have them in your house. But if you don't, you can get them at your local supermarket or drugstore anyway. So let's begin. The single cause of virtually all cases of bad breath are the smelly byproducts of anaerobic bacteria found on the surface of your tongue. Not your teeth or your gums, but your tongue. In case you were wondering, the word anaerobic literally means without oxygen. These anaerobic bacteria love to live in places with little or no oxygen. If you stick out your tongue and you look very closely, you'll see many tiny fibers all over its surface. Since the bacteria involved are anaerobic, they can't survive on the surface of your tongue, where there's oxygen in your mouth. Instead, they actually thrive down between these fibers, where there is little or no oxygen, and at least 80% of them live in a specific triangle shape area near the back of your tongue. That's because the front part of your tongue brushes against the hard palate, which is the roof of your mouth when you're talking, making it kind of self-cleaning. The back part of your tongue doesn't, though. It only brushes against the soft palate at the back of your mouth, which doesn't cause enough friction to produce any similar cleaning action there, leaving the bad breath bacteria to run riot. And when they do, they break down various proteins in the food you eat, in mucus and phlegm produced by your body, and in diseases or damaged tissue in your mouth. The byproducts are very smelly chemical compounds, collectively known as volatile sulfur compounds, or more simply, VSCs. And when I say these smell bad, I really mean it. The same compounds you find in bad breath are also found in stuff like rotten eggs, decayed meat, sweaty feet, feces, and even dead bodies. Imagine all those odors rolled into one. That's bad breath. Everyone has some level of these bacteria in their mouth. If you don't have obvious bad breath, it just means you have a very low level that don't make enough VSCs to be detected by the human nose. However, the numbers of these bacteria can sometimes increase dramatically by a factor of millions, causing the level of these smelly compounds to increase in the same way. It's only then that the level of VSCs being produced start to become detectable to the human nose, and it becomes bad breath. So what do you do about it? Well, before we get into the technique developed by the NIH scientists I mentioned earlier, let's just briefly cover a few things that can diminish your bad breath problem right away. I'm talking at least 50% by themselves. Don't skip any of the recommendations you're about to hear. When you combine them with the information that will be revealed later in this presentation, you can cut the time needed to cure your bad breath to a matter of days, sometimes even hours. The reason for that is simple. These recommendations counteract the main reason why the level of VSC-producing bacteria in your mouth can increase to a level that causes bad breath in the first place. The first of them is simply having a dry mouth, which contributes to the problem for two reasons. The first being that saliva washes away both particles of food and VSC-producing bacteria. If there isn't enough of it, food particles stay in your mouth until they begin to rot, which means the bacteria feed on them and multiply, and of course, make your breath even worse. The other reason is that saliva contains a relatively high amount of oxygen, which, being anaerobic, your bad breath bacteria don't like. If there isn't enough saliva, the amount of oxygen in your mouth is that much less, allowing those bacteria to thrive and once again, make your breath even worse. Sometimes dry mouth is caused by medical problems like radiation poisoning. Often it's caused by smoking and drinking alcohol, both of which can have an extreme drying effect on your mouth. More often than not, though, it's caused by something much more mundane. You're simply not drinking enough water. Everyone knows you need water. Your entire body is mostly just a big bag of water, with a few chemicals thrown in. It's involved in every process your body needs to do to keep you alive. Most people wouldn't live a week without it, and yet chronic dehydration is one of the most common physiological problems in the entire world. And I don't just mean the third world. Most North Americans and Europeans are as chronically dehydrated as the rest of humanity. So obviously, rehydration should be the first order of business. If you're serious about getting rid of bad breath, up your daily water intake. Begin by replacing every can of soda you currently drink with water. That's a good start. Do the same with alcohol too, and with coffee. In fact, coffee deserves a special mention. Have you ever heard of the term pH? It stands for potential hydrogen, which is a term used to describe how acid or how alkaline something is. A pH of 7.0 is neutral. If anything has a lower pH, it is acidic. If it has a higher pH, it is alkaline. Your mouth has a normal pH of about 6.5, which means it's normally only mildly acidic. The bacteria that cause bad breath, however, prefer things to be more acidic. As far as they're concerned, the more acidic your mouth is, the better. And the problem with coffee, whether it contains caffeine or not, is that it is very acidic. If you've ever noticed an unpleasant bitter taste during and immediately after drinking a cup of coffee, it's because of that acidity. The solution is, of course, simple. Stop drinking coffee altogether. If you're a caffeine addict, that's probably easier said than done. You have to begin somewhere though, and reducing your intake by at least 1 cup a day and replacing it with water is as good a place to start as any. Now, going back to alcohol for a minute, it's worth mentioning another potential problem that you may not even think of: alcohol-based mouthwash. Some of these can have as much as 30% alcohol in them, which is far more than many alcoholic drinks do. Some companies that make them say they add so much alcohol because it supposedly kills the germs that cause bad breath. That's the marketing speak. The real reason is that it stops the mouthwash from looking cloudy, keeping it nice and clear so that it appeals to their target market. They don't tell you that. And they also don't tell you that any beneficial effect is almost immediately canceled out by the severe drying effect of so much alcohol. Even an antiseptic mouthwash, which kills off the bacteria, wears off within about 2 or 3 hours, and the bacteria start to grow back with a vengeance. And if you need yet another reason to avoid them altogether, alcohol also seems to lift VSCs in the same way that it lifts the top notes in perfume, meaning that when it does wear off and your bad breath comes back, it smells even worse than before. You might have noticed everything I've mentioned so far involves stuff you put in your mouth, so I do have to mention the biggie: food. If you're eating lots and lots of high protein or highly processed foods, you're bound to have an issue with your breath anyway. since these are exactly the kinds of foods that bacteria causing your bad breath thrive on. The kind of stuff I'm talking about includes eggs, milk, cheese, candy, chocolate, nuts, chicken, beef, pork, bread, and most canned and frozen foods. I won't advocate avoiding these foods altogether though, as they only become a problem when you eat them to excess. So just cut down on them. I know it sounds terribly cliched, but having a so-called balanced diet, which really just means eating lots of different things but nothing to excess, really is the way to stay in good overall health, not to mention stop bad breath in its tracks. To summarize, you need lots more water and much less alcohol, coffee, and crap food. Those are the basics that I'm certain most people watching this will promptly ignore. But since the only way to cure bad breath is to change the environment in your mouth from one that supports the growth of the VSC-producing bacteria to one that will not, those few simple recommendations will cut your bad breath problem in half before you do anything else. And when you do that, you'll be ready to move on to the next stage, cleaning your tongue. Most people never clean their tongue, even though, as you know, that's the source of most bad breath. A study at the University of Toronto in Canada has proven that tongue cleaning will reduce sulfur gases and offensive odor by 75%. Think about it. If you follow the recommendations I mentioned earlier, you may have already halved your bad breath problem, and now just by properly cleaning your tongue, you could reduce it by a further 75%. And we haven't even got to the core treatment yet. Here's how you do it. You could simply brush your tongue with your toothbrush while doing your teeth and gums. If you do it this way, make sure you only brush in one direction, from back to front, and use plenty of warm water to make sure the mucus and debris you remove is washed away. However, a much better way is to use something specifically designed for the job. A tongue scraper. These are small plastic implements that you use to literally scrape the surface of your tongue. They're very cheap. You'll find them for about $3 to $4 in most supermarkets and drugstores. If you can't find one locally, look them up online. Lots of companies sell them by mail order. The best one available by a mile is called the Aura Brush. It has long, stiff bristles in front of the scraper itself. These were designed after a surgeon's scrub brush, which they use to remove bacteria from their hands before they operate. On the Aura Brush, they reach down to clean between the fibers on your tongue, instead of just scraping over the top of them like most other scrapers do. If all else fails, you could even use an upturned spoon as a makeshift tongue scraper. It won't be as good, but it seems to do a reasonably good job, though I only recommend this as a short-term stopgap solution. Whatever kind of tongue scraper you use, wet it with warm water and then gently but firmly scrape your tongue in a back-to-front motion. About a dozen scrapes should be enough, but rinse it off every 2 to 3 scrapes. Scraping your tongue is not a cure in itself, even though a number of companies that make tongue scrapers claim it is. What it actually does, apart from scraping away any larger debris, is remove a lot of the mucus layers that insulate the oxygen-hating bacteria on your tongue from the oxygen present in your mouth. This by itself is incredibly beneficial, but it's still not enough. By the way, if you have a white coating on your tongue, then what you're seeing is the whole bad breath process in action. The bacteria and the mucus and the proteins and the VSCs, the white coating is all of them combined. In most cases, this white coating will disappear gradually if you follow all of the recommendations in this presentation. However, if your problem has been long-standing for many years, there might be some white staining on the tongue itself, which is caused by the long-term presence of sulfuric material. In a small number of cases, the tongue may even be permanently stained, though this is very rare. Anyway, once you're done scraping, you're ready to really get down to business. To get your bad breath problem down as close to 0% as possible, you can use a key fact about the bacteria involved against them: that they are anaerobic. meaning they thrive in a low oxygen environment. Earlier I said that the only way to cure bad breath is to change the environment in your mouth from one that supports the growth of the VSC producing bacteria to one that will not, by changing your mouth from a low oxygen environment to a high oxygen environment. You will create the exact conditions that will not support the growth of these bacteria. So after scraping away any protective layers of mucus and debris from the tongue, you can now help create an even higher oxygen level environment using something you probably already have in some cupboard. Hydrogen peroxide. The hydrogen peroxide molecule is composed of 2 hydrogen atoms and 2 oxygen atoms. It looks like regular water, but it is one of the most powerful known oxidizing agents. When it comes into contact with harmful microorganisms, they're goners in seconds. That's why your own white blood cells make hydrogen peroxide in abundance. They use it to kill germs. It is the first and by far the best line of defense that your body has against any infection. It also has a very long history of medical use. Doctors used it to successfully treat a deadly pneumonia epidemic in India in the 1920s. In the 1960s, researchers at Baylor University in Texas proved it to be safe and effective against a whole range of diseases. It has also been extensively tested at other U.S. medical schools and institutes such as Yale, Harvard, and UCLA, and in fact, has been used in mainstream medicine for many years in other countries, including the UK, France, Germany, China, Japan, Russia, and even Cuba. It comes in many different concentrations, ranging from 3% right up to 99.6%. Most drugstores sell it in solutions of 3 or 6% for topical or oral use. And it's extremely cheap. You can pick up a small bottle for about 65 cents in some stores. Here's how to use it to help eliminate bad breath. Mix the solution of 50% hydrogen peroxide and 50% water, and then after scraping your tongue, just swish it around in your mouth and gargle it a bit for 1 full minute. Then spit it out and rinse with plain water. It's that simple. You should only use a 3% solution. If you can't get a 3% solution, you can use a 6% solution by increasing the level of dilution from 1 part water, 1 part hydrogen peroxide, to at least 2 parts water, 1 part hydrogen peroxide. However, you should never use anything higher than 6%. In some countries, hydrogen peroxide is sold by volume, which is a measurement of the quantity of oxygen produced when it is decomposed, instead of by percentage of the total solution. For reference, 3% hydrogen peroxide is roughly equivalent to a 10 volume concentration and 6% to a 20 volume concentration. The effect of tongue cleaning and this hydrogen peroxide mouthwash is to introduce a higher level of oxygen into the living environment of the VSC producing bacteria. However, you now need to combine this oxygenation with a further reduction in the acidity of your mouth. Cutting out coffee will have already helped out a lot, but you still need to go that bit further. You can do that by making your own acidity-reducing mouth paste, which is a mixture of baking soda, which is also known as bicarbonate of soda, common table salt, and hydrogen peroxide. The reason for using hydrogen peroxide are the same as before, but why baking soda? Well, when you were a school kid, did you ever experiment with mixing baking soda with vinegar? If so, do you remember what happened? The mixture bubbled and popped and frothed. Some kind of reaction was taking place because vinegar and baking soda don't mix very well together. That's because vinegar has a low pH, meaning it's acidic, and baking soda has a higher pH, meaning it's more alkaline. The reaction you saw was both substances in effect balancing each other out. In other words, the baking soda acted to increase the vinegar pH towards neutral, while the vinegar acted to decrease the baking soda pH towards neutral. Using baking soda in this mouth paste creates the same reaction, though on a much smaller scale that is invisible to the naked eye. Its alkalinity will balance out the acidic environment in your mouth towards a pH of 6.5, which, while being slightly acidic, is near to neutral 7.0 and is the normal pH for a healthy mouth. The use of table salt is for a different reason. It's a good, gentle abrasive. In fact, it has been used to clean teeth for that very reason as far back as the days of the Roman Empire. But since it acts very gently, it's also a good abrasive for cleaning your tongue too. Also, when in a solution where it can be tasted, like when mixed with your saliva, it becomes hypertonic, which means it will draw water from the cells that are bathed in it. In your mouth, this pushes your saliva glands into overdrive, which will help to combat any problems with dry mouth too. You won't be swallowing any of this, by the way, so it should be okay to use if you're on a salt-restricted diet. However, please consult with your doctor first to make sure. Here's how the mouth paste is made. Mix 3 teaspoons of baking soda with 1 teaspoon of table salt. Add enough hydrogen peroxide to the mixture to form a thick paste. If the undiluted hydrogen peroxide feels too strong, you can add water, like you did with the mouthwash. That's all you do. As a time-saving measure, you can mix up as much baking soda and salt as you wish at any one time, keeping it in an airtight container. Don't add the hydrogen peroxide yet though. It starts to degrade the moment it's opened, which is why you should always buy the smallest bottles you can find. It's better to get a number of small bottles rather than a big one. Instead, only make as much paste as you need for each individual brushing. Do this by pouring a small amount of the baking soda salt mixture into the palm of your hand. And add just enough hydrogen peroxide and water if you want to dilute it, to make just that amount into a thick paste. The exact amount of baking soda salt mixture you use is something you'll have to learn by trial and error. Some people's mouths are larger than others. Some people just like to use less or more with each brushing. After using it 2 or 3 times, you should develop a pretty good idea of how much is enough for you. Use this mouth paste in the same way you use normal toothpaste. But make sure to gently brush all parts of your mouth, your teeth, your gums, your tongue, and even the inside of your cheeks. That's why I call this a mouth paste instead of just a toothpaste. You can even floss while the paste is still in your mouth to help get it between your teeth. For that, I recommend using dental tape instead of dental floss. Since it's much thicker, it cleans a wider area and it won't cut your gums as easily. Also, don't use cold water when brushing. Use the hottest water you can bear, without burning yourself, obviously. Cleaning anything with hot water works much better than cold. Your mouth is no different. Some people using both the hydrogen peroxide mouthwash and the mouth paste complain that it hurts their gums, that they feel like they are being burned, and that they even turn white for a few minutes. If something like that happens, it usually indicates a very poor state of gum health. The turning white part is a reaction between the hydrogen peroxide and an enzyme in your blood called catalase that is turning it into water and oxygen gas, indicating your gums are very bloody. This whiteness fades after a few minutes. Many people use hydrogen peroxide to clean small cuts, and the same white foaming can be seen in those situations too. When gums are in a good state of health, they have little or no bleeding, so there is little or nothing for the hydrogen peroxide to react with in that way. In most cases, it's possible to deal with the problem by simply diluting everything further and gradually working back from there. For example, instead of the previously recommended mixture ratios, start off with, say, 4 parts of water for every 1 part hydrogen peroxide instead. In other words, just add 4 times more water than hydrogen peroxide. See how that goes. If it still feels painful, dilute it more. If it seems to be doing nothing at all, decrease the level of dilution to 3 parts water and so on. Also, it's okay to leave the salt out of the mouth paste mixture until your gums are in a better state, so just use baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, and water. Salt is a good abrasive, but until your gums are much less bloody, you are literally rubbing salt into a wound. In situations like this, it takes a bit of trial and error to get the starting mixture right. You shouldn't really feel anything more than a slight tingling sensation. Once you get that, you're on the right track. However, within a very short space of time, you should find that your gums will begin to harden up, meaning you can reduce the level of dilution further. If you still experience problems, try using the paste only every second day and just brush with plenty of plain warm water the other day. This should help in a very severe case of sensitivity, and as things improve, you can gradually push the water-only day to every third day, then every fourth day, and so on. So, there you go. That's the exact method that has completely eliminated bad breath for thousands of people. There's no reason why it won't do the same for you, if you use it, that is. However, if you do try it but don't notice significant results within the first week of daily usage, you can try creating a mouthwash using tea tree oil instead. You'll find it at virtually any health store. It's more expensive than hydrogen peroxide, but often works better for some people. You can also try it if you simply don't like the taste of hydrogen peroxide either. The tea tree is native to Australia, and tea tree oil has been recognized by the Australian dental profession as a potent remedy for all kinds of oral health problems since 1930. Before using it to treat bad breath, make sure to test a couple of drops on your skin overnight to make sure you're not allergic to it. If you're not, then just mix 1 or 2 drops and no more in plain water and gargle with it just like you would using the hydrogen peroxide mouthwash. As a final note, it's worth mentioning that both the hydrogen peroxide and tea tree treatment protocols described in this presentation are designed to effectively treat the 90% of bad breath cases that are caused by VSC-producing bacteria. However, of the remaining 10%, about 7% feature an odor that seems to come mainly from the nasal cavity and not the mouth at all. This odor has a different quality to bad breath caused by VSCs. The hydrogen peroxide and tea tree treatment may have some positive effect. Usually, more specialized treatment is required. If you have this type of bad breath, a trip to the dentist may be in order. It's likely something else is going on in your mouth, as is the case with the hundreds of other diseases and conditions that together cause the remaining 3% of cases, most of which usually require specialized medical treatment.